So the first thing we're going to look at is actually how to solve a simple exponential function plugging in values to it. So when we want to solve this, the first thing we're going to look at is instead of going from the top to the bottom, we're going to go from the bottom to the top. We're going to look at the positive numbers and go to the negative numbers because the positive numbers are easier and those are things you've already done. So in this case, I have 7 squared, which is 49. Then I have 7 to the first, which is 7. Now we start getting into the other numbers. The next one is 7 to the 0 power. 7 to the 0 power, remember, anything raised to the 0 power is 1. And if you look, it makes sense because 49 divided by 7 is 7. 7 divided by 7 is 1. And then if we keep that pattern going, the negative exponent, so 7 to the negative 1, is 1/7. And then we have 7 to the negative 2, which is going to be 1/49. So you're going to get those fractional values there. So this problem is the same as the last problem, same topic. The difference is this one's giving it to you as a fraction to start with, which makes it a little more complicated, but it's going to be the exact same steps. So just follow along. We're going to work from the bottom to the top again. So we're going to do the positive ones first. So 1/6 to the first power is just 1/6. 1/6 to the 0 power, remember, anything raised to the 0 power is always 1. Nothing else, it was always 1. 1/6 to the negative first power. Now, remember, negative exponents don't change the sign, they flip things over. So since 1/6 is already a fraction, we're going to flip that fraction over, and it is going to become just 6. 1/6 to the negative second power, we're going to flip it over again. So this becomes 6 to the second power, which is 36. 1/6 to the negative third power is 6 to the third power, which is 216. Okay, so notice the signs don't change, they just flip over with the negative exponents. All right, now we're going to move on to the graphing part. The graphing part is very similar to the last two problems that we've done. The difference is after we get the answers, we have to graph it. So you'll notice this problem is 1/2 to the x power. You are always going to be using -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2 for these problems. So again, we're going to work from the bottom up just to make our lives a little bit easier. 1/2 to the second power is 1/4. 1/2 to the first power is 1/2. 1/2 to the 0 again is 1. 1/2 to the negative first power flips over, so it's 2 to the first, which is 2. And then 1/2 to the negative second power is 2 to the second, which is 4. So then we're going to graph those points on the graph. So we've got -2, 4, so it's right about there. -1, 2. Then we got 0, 1, 1, 1/2, and 2, 1/4. When you're graphing it, make sure to use that tool right there, and you can type your answers in. Once you're done getting it, typing them all in, you're going to click this button right there, and that's going to make you a nice little curve. If the curve doesn't come out to look like that, or the opposite direction as you're going to see in the next problem, you might have made a mistake. It should be a nice curve like that. So in this problem, it's the same as the last one. The difference is this one's got a whole number on it, so it's a little bit simpler to work with. We're still going to go backwards. So 3 squared is 9. 3 to the first is 3. 3 to the 0 is 1. 3 to the negative first power is 1/3. 3 to the negative second power is 1 and 3 squared in the bottom. So it's 1/9. Again, I'm going to graph those 5 points. So I've got -2 and 1/3, or 1/9, -1 and 1/3, 1 and 0, 1 and 3, and then 2 and 9. We're going to highlight, connect those dots, and we're going to get a nice curve. If you're paying attention to the news, that looks like the disease curve that we have currently. This is a new topic, but the same process. In this problem, you're going to notice that the problem has a 5 halves in front of the 2 to the x. What we're going to do is we're going to do the 2 to the x totally by itself first, and then we're going to multiply everything by 5 over 2. So I've got 2 to the negative second power, which, as we've seen before, is 1/4. I've got 2 to the negative first power, which is 1/2. 2 to the 0 is 1. 2 to the first is 2. And 2 to the second is 4. Now, I'm going to multiply every one of these problems by 5 over 2. The nice thing is, if you're using this tool to type it in, you do not have to reduce your fractions. So when we're multiplying our fractions, we multiply the top and we multiply the bottom. So this one's going to be 5 over 8, because 5 times 1 is 5. 4 times 2 is 8. 5 over 4. 5, 2. 2 times 5 is 10, so it's 10 over 2. 4 times 5 is 20 over 2. Since you're using that tool, you can type those numbers in exactly as that is there, and you do not have to reduce your fractions. So it's going to be negative 2 to the 5/8, so it's like right about there. Negative 1 and 5/4, it's right about there. 0 and 5 over 2, it's right about there. Then 1 and 10 over 5, which is right there. And 2 and 20 over 2, which is right about there. So we have our nice curve. In this topic, we're adding one new thing. We're adding the asymptote. The asymptote is always going to be that one right there, and it is always going to be on the x-axis. So the first thing you can do before you even do the problem is to click that button and put it right on the x-axis. After that, the problem is no different than the other topics that we've already done. We're just going to plug the numbers in and get my graph. So in this case, notice there's a negative sign in front of the 3 to the x. Just like in the last problem, I'm not going to deal with the negative until after I find my answers. So I'm going to go through. 3 to the negative second power is 1/9. Then I have 1/3, 1, 3, and 9. Now, since there was a negative sign in front, I'm going to change and multiply all my numbers by a negative. So it's negative 1/9, negative 1/3, negative 1, negative 3, and negative 9. And now I'm going to graph those just like I did in the other topic. So negative 2, negative 1/9, negative 1, negative 1/3, 1, 1, or 0 and 1, negative 1, 1 and negative 3, and 2 and negative 9. And then I connect my dots and make my nice curve using that button. Okay, this is the last problem we're going to look at. This problem is probably the most confusing problem, but because of a very simple little sign. If we look in the problem, there's a negative up with the x. Now, that isn't actually a major problem, except for when we're doing the calculations, all the signs of the numbers that I'm going to plug in change. So when we're looking at them, this is going to be negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. Those are the numbers I'm plugging in. But because of that negative sign up here, that negative becomes a positive, so that's really a 2. That negative 1 becomes a positive 1. That 0 still stays 0. That 1 becomes a negative 1, and that 2 becomes a negative 2. So when I do my calculations, those are the things that are going to actually matter. So 5/3 to the second power, I'm going to square both numbers. So 5 times 5 is 25, and 3 times 3 is 9. 5/3 to the first power is just 5/3. Anything to the 0 power is 1. 5/3 to the negative first power, I have to flip it over. So this becomes 3/5. And 5/3 to the negative second power again flips over and becomes negative or 9/25. Just like the first one just flipped over. Now, same thing we did in the last problem. I got to graph my asymptote first. So I'm going to use that button right there, and it's going to go right on the axis. Now to graph my points, I'm going to make sure I use the original numbers that I plugged in, the -2, the -1, 0, 1, and 2, and then my answers. So -2 is 25/9, is right about there. Again, make sure you use the button to actually put these numbers in. Do not use the pencil. -1 and 5/3, it's right about there. 0 and 1, 1 and 3/5, and then 2 and 9/25. So you're going to get a nice little curve that's going to go down like that.